You're with ABC News. It's 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time and 6 a.m. in the West. Leading our bulletin this hour, President Donald Trump says the US Navy will escort oil and gas tankers through the Strait of Hormuz if necessary, as global energy prices continue to climb. A fifth of the world's daily oil consumption passes through this narrow route on Iran's southern coast. We'll cross to our Washington correspondent for more on this in a moment, and we'll get analysis from economist Chris Richardson. Also ahead, relief for some Australians stranded in Dubai, with the first flight to Sydney taking off. Thousands of Australians became trapped after airspace over the Middle East was closed and flights were suspended on the weekend. An 8-year-old girl from the Gold Coast has died in a snowmobile accident while holidaying with her family in Japan. This is the fourth Australian death on Japan's ski fields since the start of this year. A $100 million contract terminated and a 25-year partnership over, with Jackie Henderson announcing her departure as co-host of the Kyle and Jackie O Show. We'll cross to our Sydney reporter on that shortly. And a blood moon lights up the night sky. Stargazers turning out in droves to catch a glimpse of the last total lunar eclipse for almost 3 years. It's Wednesday, the 4th of March. I'm Gemma Veness from the land of the Darug people in Parramatta in Western Sydney, and this is ABC News Mornings. US President Donald Trump says the US Navy is preparing to escort oil and gas tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. Rocket attacks by Iran have effectively shut down all shipping through the narrow strip between the Gulf and the Indian Ocean, through which about a fifth of global oil and gas is transported, with commercial insurers unwilling to bear the risk of that transit. Barbara Miller joins us now from Washington, DC. Barb, what do we know?
Well, Donald Trump has said that the US military, as soon as possible, can begin to escort oil and gas tankers through that key shipping lane. This is really the first acknowledgement from the administration that they are concerned about the impact of rising fuel prices. Donald Trump also saying that the government will provide political risk insurance for companies concerned about going through there. Now, they should be concerned because Iran has threatened to attack vessels going through that shipping lane. We could also, for example, see the Houthis in Yemen trying to jump on that, as it were, could also put any vessels going through there at risk. But rising fuel prices, of course, a concern for the whole world and in the US, a political issue for the president, who promised to bring down prices. And when he was asked about whether he was concerned about rising oil prices earlier, he acknowledged that they were going up. He said, look, we will see a little rise in them. But he said, as soon as this ends, those prices are going to drop, I believe, lower than ever before, Donald Trump claims. So we wait and see, I guess, whether anyone takes up this apparent offer announced in a social media post by the president of a Navy escort through the Strait of Hormuz.
The president also took questions in the White House today on the rationale for going to war. What did he have to say about that?
Look, he was responding essentially to some eyebrow-raising comments that were made yesterday by his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio told reporters that the justification for the exact timing of Operation Epic Fury was because that the US was aware that Israel was about to attack Iran. And Marco Rubio said that that would put US interests at risk in the case of retaliation from Iran. Now, Donald Trump came out today and essentially said the opposite. He said, look, if anything, I forced Israel's hand, he said, because the president said it was his assessment that Iran was about to attack Israel. Let's just hear the president on that question.
Based on the way the negotiation was going, I think they were going to attack first, and I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand, but Israel was ready and we were ready, and we've had a very, very powerful impact because virtually everything they have has been knocked out now.
Now, later, Marco Rubio came out again and essentially tried to blame the reporting of his initial comments on fake news and said that he had been misquoted, essentially. But I guess what this does is it all paints a picture of an administration who can't quite get its messaging right on exactly why Operation Epic Fury was launched and who was calling the shots.
Barb, we've also heard of an attack on the US Embassy in Dubai.
That's right. We had confirmation from the administration that a drone struck a parking lot next to the embassy. That set off a fire. That fire has now been successfully contained, but it's not the only embassy in the region that's come under attack. The US embassies in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have also come under attack and were closed. And the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has acknowledged that these are currently a big target for Iran.
Barbara Miller joining us there from Washington, DC. Well, thousands of Australians found themselves stranded in the Middle East when the outbreak of war led to enormously disruptive airspace closures. Political reporter Romy Stevens joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Romy, what can you tell us?
Well, the Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, has given us an update that there has been a flight scheduled from Dubai to Sydney this morning. So it is due to leave and arrive. We're expecting it to arrive in Sydney later this evening. But obviously that will depend on the circumstances and the airspace being safe in that region. We know that a number of flights have been either cancelled or changed at the last minute since this conflict broke out over the weekend. So it's a very volatile situation. Now, we don't know exactly how many people are set to be on that flight as of yet, but let's take a listen to what Penny Wong had to say about it.
I understand there is a flight scheduled from Dubai to Sydney. Obviously, we would say to people on the ground, you need to ensure you stay in contact with your airline in relation to that flight if you are on it. Flights have been cancelled and changed at short notice.
Now, the federal government estimates that there are up to 115,000 Australians currently in the Middle East. Some of those are residents and others are people in transit. We know that many of them have been stranded due to these widespread airspace closures. Now, the Foreign Minister says that government-led repatriations are always part of contingencies that are considered. But she says that really the government is looking to see whether or not commercial flights or more commercial flights will resume and can resume. She says that that's the quickest way to get Australians back home, just given the large number of Australians that are in that region and are impacted. Penny Wong also is warning that this large number of people makes this the biggest consular operation that the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has ever conducted. So she says that it won't be resolved quickly.
Romy, gas and oil prices have surged. World stock markets are tumbling as these concerns grow about how long this conflict will last. What did the Trade Minister have to say about this?
Yeah, so there's been some reports that fuel prices could reach up to $3 a litre here in Australia as a result, and that was put to the Trade Minister, Don Farrell, but he said that he doesn't expect things to get that bad. However, he did acknowledge that we are in an age of uncertainty and that no one can predict how this is going to play out. Now, the federal government has said that fuel reserves are at their highest level that they have been in 15 years, and it's urging people not to worry in this space or panic buy when it comes to fuel. And then in regards to the impact of global trade disruptions, the Trade Minister, Don Farrell, said that really the government's first priority is ensuring the safety of Australians that are in that Middle East region and getting them out. But he said that there is still work underway and conversations happening when it comes to trade and mitigating that impact. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Last year was a record year for Australian trade, $1.3 trillion. We've had to navigate some pretty tough issues over the last 4 years of this government, and in our calm and steady way, that's what we'll be doing on this situation.
Don Farrell says that he's meeting with 40 of Australia's largest trading organisations later this morning to speak to them about what the federal government can do to mitigate the impacts of this conflict.
Political reporter Romy Stevens, thank you. The energy crunch in global markets has already translated to pain at the petrol bowser for Aussie motorists. With more, we're joined by Stephanie Ferrier, who's in Melbourne. Steph, what are car commuters looking at this morning?
Yes, well, this morning I'm sitting here in South Melbourne, and behind me we've seen a steady stream of motorists arriving here just to try to capitalise on some of the cheaper prices. Here, for example, behind me, unleaded is sitting at about $1.96 a litre. So it's below the $2 mark. Many places are now above $2. And as Romy was just mentioning, there are reports that we could see prices go as high as $3 a litre. Now, that's according to economists from Westpac. They've actually crunched the numbers, and they have looked at that key waterway, of course, the Strait of Hormuz, which accounts for about a fifth of the world's oil reserves that have to pass through there. At the moment, it's completely shut down, and they say that if that continues to be closed for 3 months, then, and it does impact this situation, then we could be looking at the prices going up to Brent crude $185 per barrel. Now, that would end up translating here at the bowser to an increase of anywhere between 25 cents a litre or $1 a litre. That's where we get that $3 a litre figure from. So there is obviously that real concern, but of course we have heard from President Trump saying that he is going to potentially move in the US Navy to guarantee some of those supplies to be able to go through. So we are still waiting to see how long this conflict drags on as to what the potential impact is. And we've already heard from motoring groups that it normally typically takes about 7 to 10 days for any world shocks to actually flow through to the bowser here locally. But nevertheless, there are still plenty of motorists that are trying to make sure that they do get in and get their cars filled up. This is what some of them had to say.
This is me getting in early. This is the cheap one nearby, so it seems like a few people are trying to get in early though.
Maybe it's not going to be as bad as what everybody makes out it is.
I have to fill up while I can before it gets too bad.
Brought me here. Cheap fuel prices. I'm expecting them to go up soon, so I'm trying to get in now.
Petrol's going to go up in price, and everybody's going to rush around to fill their car, and just like we're doing.
So that's just a snapshot of some motorists, and we've seen plenty of different fluctuations happening already. But as Romy mentioned, the federal government's already saying don't panic, don't rush to the service station necessarily, due to the fact that we've still got quite a few fuel supplies. And of course, also the Treasurer Jim Chalmers has written to the ACCC to get it to monitor fuel prices, because it wants, the government wants to make sure that there isn't any price gouging and opportunistic price increases as a result of this.
Steph Ferrier in Melbourne, thank you. Markets are eyeing today's GDP figures. Analysts at CBA and National Australia Bank now see the economy growing at a rapid 1% in the quarter. Westpac tips it even slightly higher. To discuss this and more on the implications of the conflict in the Middle East, we are joined by economist Chris Richardson. Chris, thank you for your time this morning. Firstly, on GDP figures, what are we expecting this morning?
Yes, something like 1% growth in the economy in the 3 months leading up to Christmas. That would be close to the fastest growth we've seen in a decade across a 3-month period. So lots of good news, economy picking up steam. It is government spending, but it is also spending by families and businesses. The problem, though, we now have an economy travelling faster than it can sustainably manage, which is also why some of that strength in the economy is showing up as higher inflation as well.
And so these figures, they look back, of course. If we look forward now, after the US and Israel struck Iran at the weekend and that expanding war there, what will this mean for our economy overall?
It hurts us, it hurts the world. Basically, there is a spike in energy costs, and energy is important. There is a spike in uncertainty. Nobody's sure what happens next, and that is another negative. Australia less affected than the average around the world, and we even pick up some positive side effects, if you like, in the sense that gas prices go up and we sell a lot of gas to the world. But a negative for the Australian economy, not a huge one, not enough to slow us heaps, perhaps enough to give the Reserve Bank a bit of pause about the next rate rise. But as of today, you would still say the Reserve Bank is looking locked and loaded for at least one more rate rise here in Australia.
And business is warning that exports are very much likely to be impacted by this conflict.
Yeah, it's possible. And again, we don't really know yet. A key trade route around the world affected, global growth affected. Those things are obvious negatives. By and large, the sorts of things that Australia sells to the world aren't as much at risk as you would see with many other economies. But it is something that will be weighing on the minds of Treasury as they think about where the economy heads from here, and the Reserve Bank as they think about where inflation heads from here.
Yeah, I mean, that is the question. What does it all mean for inflation and any moves we might see on interest rates?
It is bad news for inflation. The sort of consumer basket that flows into our inflation measure, about $1 in every $30 is coming from what we're paying at the pump. You will see higher inflation as a result of this. It is less clear that that makes the Reserve Bank more likely to raise rates. It's likely to be a one-off, right? This is the classic supply shock rather than necessarily something that gets worse and worse and worse over time. The Reserve Bank would usually look through that sort of a thing and ignore it. In this particular case, though, at a time when inflation's been hanging around longer than they'd like, it will still make them uncomfortable.
Economist Chris Richardson, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Gemma.
The US President has escalated his feud with the leader of the UK, telling reporters he's not happy with Britain's refusal to support US-Israeli offensive strikes on Iran. Donald Trump lashed out at Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer today after Downing Street denied the US use of British bases for its attack. Europe correspondent Elias Kluwer reports.
The UK's The Sun newspaper, the notorious London tabloid. Inside, US President Donald Trump lashes his British counterpart, Sir Keir Starmer. Now, there is context to this. On Monday, US President Donald Trump criticised the UK for being too slow to allow the Americans to use British air bases in the Middle East to launch attacks into Iran. But in this interview, Donald Trump goes even further. He says the UK should have helped. It should have. He then says France has been great, other European countries have been great, but the UK, they've been a bit different. He also goes on to say that the so-called special relationship between London and Washington could be in peril. Now, why is this significant? Well, it seems as if Donald Trump is now trying to exert maximum pressure on allies to generate maximum support.
It's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
In response, Sir Keir Starmer says the British government does not believe in regime change from the skies, but it is deploying more counter-drone aircraft to the Middle East. Across Europe, more countries are looking to aid the United States in the so-called defensive operations. That's political or diplomatic spin for essentially allowing the Americans to use its facilities to launch attacks into Iran, targeting the regime's weapons infrastructure. Now, the Iranian foreign minister has said that if any European countries aid the Americans, it'll be considered an act of war.
Defensive is synonym for offensive. Doesn't make sense. Do they want to deprive Iran of its capability and capacity to fight back against the aggressors? That would be a shame if these countries take sides with the aggressors.
European countries are now focused on repatriating citizens stuck in the Middle East. France says it's now ready to repatriate its most vulnerable citizens stuck there. British government says it's also ready to put on flights from that region, but it's an enormous logistical challenge in a region that's becoming increasingly unpredictable.
The French President Emmanuel Macron has ordered France's aircraft carrier to the Mediterranean. He says the Charles de Gaulle, along with its frigate escort and complement of fighter jets, will help protect Allied assets. The UK and Greece are also sending air defence forces to Cyprus after drones struck the Royal Air Force base on the island. France, the UK and Germany have previously said they were not involved in the US-led strikes on Iran, but are prepared to enable necessary and proportionate defensive action.
We must stand by our friends and allies in the region for their security and territorial integrity. It is indeed our responsibility. It is strictly defensive. It aims to protect and restore peace as quickly as possible. It is a matter of France's credibility to be a trusted partner that honours its commitments, especially in these troubled times.
In the same pre-recorded address, the French leader was scathing of the US and Israel's initiation of the war against Iran, saying it was not in accordance with international law.
The United States of America and Israel have decided to launch military operations. They were conducted outside international law, which we cannot endorse.
Following Emmanuel Macron's announcement of their expansion of their nuclear program, Poland plans to seek its own nuclear arsenal. Prime Minister Donald Tusk says his government is holding talks with France and a group of its closest European allies regarding an advanced nuclear deterrence program.
Poland takes the issue of nuclear safety extremely seriously. As you know, we are investing heavily in future nuclear power plants, and Poland will not want to be passive when it comes to nuclear security in a military context. We will cooperate with our allies, including France, who put forward this specific proposal. And as our capabilities increase, we will try to prepare Poland for autonomous action in this matter in the future.
A Gold Coast schoolgirl has died after a snowmobile accident in Japan. 8-year-old Chloe Jeffries is the fourth Australian to die while holidaying in Japan this year. Reporter Melissa McKay is following the story and joins us now with the details. Mel, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Gemma, this is just a really tragic story coming out of Japan this morning. 8-year-old Chloe Jeffries, as you said, has died after a snowmobile accident in Hakuba, a really popular ski resort or area in Japan. A lot of Australians travel there to go skiing and to snowmobile, evidently, as Chloe and her mother were at the time. They were taking part in a snowmobile tour when the vehicle flipped, trapping little Chloe underneath. The 8-year-old girl has been described by her netball team on the Gold Coast as having a beautiful nature and a cheeky, infectious smile. Her team are going to hold a tribute to her before the season kicks off this weekend. Just a really tragic event for that family and no doubt that community on the Gold Coast. We know that the snowmobile company, the tour company that Chloe and her mum were taking part in at the time, has now suspended those operations for the time being. DFAT is also providing what consular assistance it can to those in Japan. But as you mentioned, Gemma, this is the fourth Australian to die while on holidays in Japan this year. Just a really tragic news out of Japan this morning.
Melissa McKay, thank you. Jackie O. Henderson has quit her hit Sydney radio show with controversial broadcaster Kyle Sandilands following an on-air argument late last month. Her departure comes just 2 years into a 10-year contract for the pair worth $200 million. Now, with more, we are joined by reporter Max Tillman, who's in Sydney. Max, what more can you tell us?
Good morning. Well, there may be no more sobering a way to announce a breakup than via a statement on the Australian Stock Exchange, but that's exactly what we got last night from ARN, the parent company of Kiss FM, where Kyle and Jackie O have dominated Sydney's airwaves since 2013. That particular statement making it very clear that Jackie O Henderson has terminated her contract with the network. The statement says that she's handed in her notice. She says she will no longer be able to work with Kyle Sandilands. That statement goes on to say that she would cease to present the show with Kyle and Jackie O now effectively off the air. Now, Kyle Sandilands, on the other hand, has been issued a 14-day notice in order to breach the remedy, in the words of that particular statement. He's been told that if he does not find a way of remedying that breach within the next 14 days, he could also see his contract terminated. Now, this entire saga goes back to February the 20th, where during a 7-minute long exchange, Kyle Sandilands effectively accused Jackie of losing her work ethic and becoming fixated over astrology and star signs in what was a larger conversation about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. In that 7-minute exchange, Jackie Henderson described it as an attack. That's effectively what caused this fallout. Now, since February 20th, Jackie has not been on air. Kyle has essentially been running the show himself. Yesterday, in their programming, he did say that he did believe that Henderson would return. That was obviously hours before that statement to the Australian Stock Exchange made it explicitly clear that that certainly does not seem to be the case at all. Now, for many Sydney-siders, Kyle and Jackie O have effectively become part of the furniture since 2013. In fact, we had a chance to speak to some people on the streets this morning, and it was really a mixture of confusion as well as shock and surprise. Let's take a quick listen to what some people had to tell us.
I think it's terrible, you know. It's they've been on the air for so long, and it's very sad.
It's crazy. I can't believe it. I just always thought they'd be on radio forever. Like they're the duo that's always been there. It's crazy.
Now, Kyle and Jackie O signed what was one of the most lucrative and longest contracts in Australian media history in 2024. That was a 10-year, $200 million contract. Now, their run of success in Sydney has not been reflected south of the border. Their show was broadcast in Melbourne from 2 years ago. Last year, it only managed to catch around 5% of the listenership. At its peak in Sydney, it was attracting around 800,000 listeners every weekday morning. Now, the question now becomes, what happens with that 10-year contract? The pair were only 2 years into it. It was expected to run until 2034.
Max Tillman there in Sydney. Thank you. Australian stargazers have been treated to a total lunar eclipse overnight, coinciding with the final night of Chinese Lunar New Year celebrations. The phenomenon occurs when the moon, earth and sun line up perfectly to create a blood moon. Visibility was high for much of the country, with a cloud-free night sky. It reached totality at 10:33 on the east coast and 7:33 in Perth, and lasted about 58 minutes. That's the shortest since 2021. Now, the eclipse begins when the moon moves through the Earth's outer shadow, and totality is reached once the moon is completely encompassed by Earth's shadow, called the umbra, turning the entire moon a shade of red. Last night's blood moon was also visible in the Americas, the Pacific and Asia. For Australia, this is the fourth such eclipse in the past 5 years out of a possible 6. Australia's next blood moon will take place on New Year's Eve in 2028. Perth will have the best seat in the house, with the eclipse beginning in 2028 and finishing early in the new year of 2029. It's time to check in on the weather now with Nate Byrne. Nate, is that low that's been flooding central Australia, has it finally gone?
Yes, it has, Gemma. I promised you it was going to wash out, and it has, but we're not quite done with the wild weather that was caused by that system. You've been feeling how muggy and gross it is in Sydney at the moment. Well, if you're anywhere north of the trough that this system's left behind, you're still very much in it. Not much to see here from the satellite picture, plenty up north. The tropics are incredibly active at the moment. In fact, I'm watching a lot of tropical lows right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, all with a chance of intensification in the coming days. But here's the trough laying through New South Wales, what's left of it. Still kicking up some showers and thunderstorms today. Oh, by the way, I'm also watching heat over in the west. We've got heat wave conditions on, some high fire danger for a big swathe of WA as a result out of that. But in terms of storms, we will see more, particularly through the southeast of New South Wales. Leads back along a trough up through Queensland southwest, where we've got flooding going on, major flooding on several rivers. And then we've got a very active day for the tropics. Lots and lots of potential for heavy rain in northern WA, through central parts of the Territory and up into northern Queensland as well. So, yeah, very active day for many, but luckily that low, because I don't know if you remember, Gemma, because it was so long ago. 2 weeks ago, it started around about where this one is now, and then mooched across the north, came down into central Australia, hung there for a week, and is now finally gone.
And now, which of those tropical lows that you've spoken about, which of them could bother us?
OK. Well, let's actually start with the ones that are most likely to become a cyclone. That probably going to go tonight, I reckon. If it's going to go at all, we'll probably see it as a Category 1. It's between the mainland and Christmas Island, and then it just moves away and runs off. The next one in WA, that should, it's enhancing falls along the coast, but that should stay off, and it's not particularly likely to become a cyclone. The other two, now, we'll certainly see some intensification. Even if they don't get to cyclone strength, though, they are certainly going to bring some big falls, eventually pushing a lot of moisture down into Queensland south. Now, at this stage, there's still a lot of uncertainty about exactly where they'll travel. The one off Queensland's northeast could head westwards rather than southwards. Either way you cut it, though, the concern here isn't the cyclone strength, because if they do go, they'll be fairly low level. The real concern is the rainfall that they're likely to carry. We're talking about hundreds of millimetres, and particularly in northern Queensland, that's where we've got some potential for flooding. The ground is already saturated. So a very active week ahead for tropical lows to keep an eye on. It's a heck of a lot.
And can you take us around the states, mate?
Sure, that's right. We'll start in Queensland, where that heavy rain continues across the north. The southwest cops storms as well, and we've got showers along the eastern coastal fringe. There are some clear skies in between, but for Brisbane, we're looking at just showers around this morning. You're getting to 30 degrees later. That flooding in the southwest of Queensland, of course, to keep an eye on. In New South Wales, it's the southeast, where what's left of that low, just the trough now, still triggering showers and storms, particularly for the coast and around the ranges. Does mean some falls for Sydney, 29 for you, same for Canberra, 28 there. And the wet and potentially stormy weather is still holding on in eastern Victoria for now. The rest of the state is fine though. Melbourne's getting to 22, a bit grey. And in Tasmania, we've got a little bit of wet weather. Not much to talk about here, but we'll see a bit for the south and the Bass Strait, for the west rather, and the Bass Strait Islands. It's getting to 25 in Hobart. You've got a clear day. Mostly clear in South Australia too. Just a chance of a storm maybe this afternoon in the far northeast. Adelaide's getting to 27. Over in WA, well, the south is clear. It's just about this heat over in the west. Perth's getting to 37 degrees today, and that heat continues up into the north. But then we're looking at stormy weather for the Kimberley, the eastern parts of the Pilbara as well. That extends then through between about Katherine and Tennant Creek is where we'll see the heaviest of the falls in the Territory today, but it's wet and stormy for all but the south. Showers if you're up in Darwin today, Gemma, getting to 31.
Thanks, Nate. This is ABC News. I'm Gemma Veness, and these are the top stories we're following this morning. US President Donald Trump says his Navy is preparing to escort oil and gas tankers through the Strait of Hormuz if necessary. Iran has blocked the narrow strip between the Gulf and the Indian Ocean, warning it would attack any vessel attempting to pass. About a fifth of global oil and gas is transported through the strait. The first Sydney-bound flight out of Dubai since airspace was closed over the weekend has taken off. Thousands of Australians remain stranded across the Middle East. The Emirates flight is expected to land later this evening. Jackie O Henderson has quit the Kyle and Jackie O radio show following an on-air disagreement. She and controversial broadcaster Carl Sandilands were just 2 years into their 10-year contract worth $200 million. The pair has been broadcast partners for 25 years. Sandilands has been taken off air for 2 weeks. And Aussie stargazers have been treated to a rare glimpse of a blood moon. Perth and southern WA were among the best spots in the country to see the total lunar eclipse, which glowed a deep red. And the next blood moon is set to take place in 2028. There is no sign of this latest Middle East conflict abating as Iran and Israel continue to exchange fire. Human rights groups estimate the death toll in Iran is nearing 800. While the IDF is poised to launch a ground incursion into southern Lebanon after Hezbollah retaliated with strikes on Israel in support of Iran.
HMS Dragon is one of the Royal Navy's most advanced warships, a Type 45 destroyer. When it gets to Cyprus, it won't just improve the air defence of the island as well as the British base. It also acknowledges that the war has spread, and like it or not, the UK is being pulled in towards it. In Minab in southern Iran, these are new graves, ready for the funeral of 165 people the Iranians say were killed in an attack on a girls' school on Saturday. The funeral brought the city to a standstill. Many of the dead were pupils from the school, child-sized coffins, photos of schoolgirls and grieving families. After the raid happened, the Americans said they never targeted civilians. They have yet to explain why so many children and adults were killed at the school. And in Tehran, more attacks. Iran's air defenses were mostly destroyed last year by Israel. The Americans and the Israelis have advanced a range of reasons, some contradictory, to justify why they're attacking Iran, killing civilians as well as members of the regime, and what they hope to achieve. In the last 24 hours, there has been less talk of regime change. The clearest explanation seems to be that they saw a chance to inflict serious damage on a bitter enemy. That alone is not a legal reason to go to war. Some Iranians are leaving, small numbers at this crossing into Turkey, but the war is a gamble. The US and Israel say it will open the way to peace and stability. If instead it provokes disorder and bloodshed, there will be a new refugee crisis in the Middle East and beyond.
I'm coming from Tehran, and there's a lot of chaos in the city, a lot of missiles and attacks from US and Israel. I'm not into the politics, but I know it's a lot of, it brings just a lot of sadness to people.
We hear some explosions outside of the city, but not inside of the city. Sleeping in fear and waking up in stress. So the situation is a little bit awful.
Iran continues to attack its Arab neighbors. This was Bahrain, and this was the airport in Dubai. Iran cannot match the firepower it's facing, so it's trying to disrupt American and Israeli plans by spreading the war. They even hit Oman, usually their trusted intermediary with the West.
When the United States attacks us, whether by fighter jets or the ships it deploys, they have access to our territory to strike with all kinds of missiles and aircraft. We cannot reach their territory, but we can reach their bases. I think those bases are legitimate targets.
Lebanon is becoming an increasingly intense theatre of this war. Overnight, Iran's ally, Hezbollah, hit back at Israel. And during the day, Israel has launched a series of air attacks on the southern suburbs of Beirut, a stronghold of Hezbollah. Israel has made a series of threats, not for the first time, to finish off Hezbollah once and for all. Lebanon and its long-suffering citizens have been dragged into another war that most people in their battered country do not want. Further south, close to the border with Israel, Tyre is under heavy fire. Israel has already told citizens in dozens of villages near the city in southern Lebanon to get out of their homes, a sign they have plans for a big military push. In Israel, the Prime Minister and the military top brass visited troops at an air base, filmed by the Israeli military who blurred their faces, and Mr. Netanyahu issued another warning.
Our pilots are over the skies of Iran and Tehran, as well as over the skies of Lebanon. Hezbollah made a very grave mistake when it attacked us.
The IDF has mobilized reservists and is moving forces up to the border. In 4 days, the war has spread to Gulf Arab countries and now to Lebanon. War moves fast in the Middle East because it's the world's most turbulent region and now even more dangerous.
The Iran conflict has opened a new rift between the United States and some European leaders, with US President Donald Trump stepping up his criticism of their stance on the war. Mr. Trump has singled out Spain, saying he's asked for all trade dealings between Madrid and Washington to be cut off. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has denied US requests to use his country's bases as part of the operation. President Trump has suggested the US may seek to use the bases without permission.
We could use their base if we want. We could just fly in and use it. Nobody's going to tell us not to use it, but we don't have to. But they were unfriendly, and so I told him we don't want to. Spain has absolutely nothing that we need other than great people. They have great people, but they don't have great leadership.
France, Britain and Greece are sending air defence forces to Cyprus after drones struck a UK base on the Mediterranean island. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he will send HMS Dragon, an air defence destroyer, along with helicopters with counter-drone capabilities to the region. Greece has also vowed to defend Cyprus, saying it will send frigates and fighter jets. And French President Emmanuel Macron has ordered France's nuclear-powered aircraft carrier to move from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean. But Donald Trump has continued his criticism of the UK, arguing it was too slow in allowing US bombers to use British air bases in the Middle East.
And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
Keir Starmer has said the UK does not believe in regime change from the skies, but he's facing some domestic pressure to do more, with the UK opposition noting both Australia and Canada offered their support to the US early in the conflict.
Yes, there's no question that Keir Starmer's weakness and dithering has damaged the UK's special relationship with the US. We'll now be considered a less reliable ally. The Canadians and Australians supported the USA when they took action against this murderous regime, which has slaughtered 30,000 of its own citizens. It's sponsored terrorists like Hamas, and it's tried to get hold of a nuclear weapon.
Now, Iran has warned that any European countries aiding the US would be considered an act of war. But Middle East analyst Bader Al-Saif has suggested Europe needs to offer the US more support.
Europe has been pushing itself on the footnotes of main events, unfortunately, in the past few decades, and this has been more apparent in the last few years. This war has really been internationalized now, with a NATO member being also attacked, Cyprus, that is. We cannot depend on the US for main security guarantees, and here the Gulf states, and I sit in Kuwait City, but the Gulf states in Europe share that we've long depended on the US and their defense mechanism. And I think it behooves us to strike a more independent path and probably even strengthen our ties as middle powers between the EU and the Gulf, something that we've already started doing.
Israeli authorities have closed off access to the old city of Jerusalem until further notice, blaming the conflict with Iran. And this decision means Muslims living in the West Bank cannot pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan. Bridget Rollison has more from Jerusalem.
Well, the most iconic part of Jerusalem is arguably here at the Old City, but this usually bustling and very religiously significant site has been closed because of the war, which is a big deal because that didn't even happen during October 7. It's usually packed with people and tourists when they're able to visit, but the gates of the Old City have been closed for 4 days now to anyone who doesn't live inside inside these walls all have a food shop. All other businesses have been forced to shut. The Old City is home to one of the holiest sites in Islam, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest sites in Judaism, the Western Wall, as well as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, said to be built on the place where Jesus was crucified, so very symbolic for Christians. Israeli police have closed the Old City, citing a state of emergency, and this has happened during Ramadan, where people coming to pray have been turned away.
We feel that Ramadan is very hard for us, not only for fasting, not eating, but the situation. They don't let us to go to the mosque, to the Al-Aqsa, to pray, or to open our shops, or to buy whatever we like.
It's the heart of the city, the old city. It's the place that all worshippers, tourists, they just have to pass by and buy and purchase, and it causes economical refreshing, the city.
A lot of people here in Jerusalem have been surprised that the city has been the target of strikes from Iran, given how holy this place is to many different religions. Israeli authorities did shut down access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque during the 12-day war last year. That was the longest period that mosque has been closed in 60 years.
Federal Parliament is sitting again today ahead of the release of new economic figures set to show how much the economy grew in the last 3 months of 2025. Radio National Breakfast political correspondent Tom Crowley is at Parliament House. Tom, what will the government be looking for in these figures this morning?
Well, Gemma, as far as the political debate is concerned, it's all about public versus private demand. The basis of the government's argument in the last few months that it isn't to blame for the recent uptick in inflation has been the fact that the contribution to growth from the public sector is not as big and not growing as fast as that from the private sector. Whether that will bear true for the December quarter is going to be a crucial question for the political debate. It's not the sum total of the debate about whether the government's actions are contributing to inflation. The other conversation is about household handouts, or what the government calls cost of living supports. By going to households, that goes to the private sector. So the government does play a role in both sectors. And broadly speaking, it will also want to see whether there are signs of general health, but also whether there are signs of too much heat in the economy. We know that Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock has made a comment to the effect that all meetings are live meetings, and eyes closely trained on the March meeting of the Reserve Bank after all of this global instability, the war in the Middle East and the possible impact on oil prices. The government was already bracing for the possibility of further rate hikes this year. Markets were already expecting that might happen. One in March would be bad news in one sense for the government, but also in another sense, it's kind of good cover if it's happening at exactly this time that everyone can see that the oil price is surging, that there is all of this global instability. Not the worst time for the government to be able to explain why a rate hike might be happening. The growth figures, they are, I guess, moving quite far behind us. We're in March now, and we know that the world in particular is changing just about every week. But this complete picture of growth, we know that inflation continued to be higher than the government and the Reserve Bank would like at the end of last year. So seeing some more details about different sectors of the economy will play into a narrative here in Question Time later this afternoon, where the opposition has copped some criticism from the government for not focusing enough on the economy with their line of questioning. I suspect that might change today.
Now, Tom, the Liberal Party election review, it was released yesterday by an unlikely source, that being the Prime Minister. What were the lessons in that for Angus Taylor?
Yes, Andrew Hastie was boss move from the Prime Minister, using a little bit of millennial lingo there to describe the fact that the Prime Minister decided himself, given how much scuttlebutt there was around this building and how many copies, PDFs and printed versions were being passed around of this secretive internal Liberal Party review, that he was just going to put it on the table and let everybody have a read. Not too many great surprises in this one, really. I mean, so much of this historic election defeat for the Liberal Party, we've already raked over those coals. We know about the conversations that Liberals are having about their decision to oppose a tax cut, the nuclear power policy, the party struggles with women and young voters and migrant and diaspora communities. All of these things have been pretty well ventilated. And of course, it's gotten even worse for the Liberal Party since the 2025 election. They're now bleeding as well on their right flank to One Nation. So the problems are multiplying, and that's what confronts Angus Taylor. I think the two key lessons for him are, one, that the policy platform has to be perhaps, yes, ambitious, but also clearly explained to people. There were some criticisms there of Peter Dutton's nuclear policy, suggesting that there was Liberal Party internal research pointing out that this would be a tough sell, that you'd probably need to spend a couple of really concerted years, maybe longer, if you were going to be able to bring the public's mind around to nuclear energy, something that they hadn't been contemplating much before, and that was really disregarded, that the selling job was undersold. Peter Dutton not so happy with that account, and he has some different things to say, but a message there in any policy platform that the Angus Taylor opposition will take to the next election if he makes it that long. Also as well, I suppose, about clarity of message. Two halves of the Angus Taylor political message have been boosting the standard of living and protecting the way of life. Those are the two slogans he's using. Been a lot more way of life than standard of living this week. So, as I said before, with these economic numbers, maybe it will be a little bit more of an economic focus, but it's been really all about the migration piece, the values piece for Angus Taylor so far.
And a gap is starting to emerge between the major political parties in their response to the war in the Middle East. What is the opposition saying about it?
Well, the opposition, Gemma, is starting to really freelance their views on the world after the rules-based order, as they might put it, and starting to speak in a freer way about the world that we find ourselves in, which I suppose is something that you can do if you're in opposition. I mentioned that Andrew Hastie was with us on Radio National Breakfast this morning. He's one of those who's talking about the idea that the rules-based order and international law, this question of the legality of the actions that the US and Israel have taken against Iran, that rules-based order was created by the US, that the international institutions, the UN headquarters being in New York, is a sign that this is an American world order that now the Americans have walked away from under a president he describes as an apex opportunist. And meanwhile, you have authoritarians elsewhere who don't have a lot of respect and never have for the rules-based order. Andrew Hastie's argument is that means that we should be looking closer to home, thinking about self-sufficiency. He's saying to Australians that they should wake up. James Patterson as well saying that, now that the US doesn't dominate the world, that we should look, control our own actions, but worry less about whether we can influence the actions of others. So some interesting views being put on the record there. The government, of course, not going to say anything like that, will continue to maintain that they support international law and that they want everyone to abide by it. But they're really hedging still on this question of whether they think the US and Israeli actions in Iran were justified under international law. Penny Wong saying again this morning that that's a matter for the government, or governments rather, sorry, of the US and Israel to determine whether they think it was legal and to provide a justification for that. And the government staying as a step-back position. Well, we don't like the Iranian regime very much and they don't pay attention to international law, but trying to walk both sides of the fence, it's the uncomfortable kind of tension that you have to hold when you're in government. But what's interesting is that the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who in many respects has been singing from the same song sheet as our government, he's in the country today. He'll address the Lowy Institute later on this evening, and then he'll address the Parliament tomorrow. We know he's a gifted orator whose own speeches about the rules-based order have been viewed and watched very closely from the Coalition and Labor benches. So what he tells our Parliament tomorrow will be very interesting.
Yeah, we'll be watching out for that. Radio National Breakfast political correspondent Tom Crowley. Thank you. Farmers in drought-hit southern and central New South Wales have received good rainfall for the first time in 6 months. While the rain is not considered drought-breaking, farmers say it has lifted spirits, putting water in dams and boosting pastures. Now, Brett Treasure is one of those farmers and joins us now from Cowra in New South Wales. Brett, this is great news.
It is, Gem. It is. It's really good rain.
And what did you see there at your property?
Come Monday night, the satellite picture left us in a gap between the north and the south changes, and we thought it had gone straight past. I contacted my daughter at 8:30, and we'd sort of said, "Oh well, it's all gone." come 1 o'clock in the night, it came down, and we ended up with 100 mils overnight and a further 18 mils yesterday to top it off. And it was actually runoff rain too, which is good because it filled a lot of dry dams, or 3/4 filled them anyway.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I can only imagine what it would sound like to you guys, hearing that rain falling down when it's, you know, it's been a while since you've had that.
It has, but it's also the timing. Like it's early in the autumn, so there's going to be good feed pretty quickly. We were hand feeding a lot of stock, and it's sort of alleviated that problem straight away. It'll actually keep the feed coming, and we should have a good winter now. It's really good.
Yeah, so you say the timing is great, but how fast do you need to move now to take advantage of this?
Well, we can straight away start putting in fodder crops like oats and brassica and barley, and within weeks it's changed. It's turned us right around. Yeah.
That's great news. And just give us a sense of what the impact has been of the drought up until this point.
This drought has been a sneaky little one as far as we're concerned here. It's sort of snuck up on us slowly. Mm-hmm. It hasn't been as bad as I've seen, but it's been bad enough. But like I say, it's all going to turn around pretty quickly now. So, yeah, the feeding will soon cut down, and it's right at the critical point that our ewes are just starting to lamb, so they're going to lamb onto feed now. The ewes won't miss mother so much. Yeah, it's really, really good.
Yeah, it's great news for you and your family and so many other farmers. And so we love stories like this. Brett Treasure joining us there from Cowra. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thanks, Gemma.
And it's time to check in on the weather now. Nate, what's happening?
Gemma, we've got lots more action on the way through the tropics, but luckily that low that's been bothering us for such a long time, last seen over New South Wales, is now gone. Now, it has left a trough in its place that we're watching, because that could still kick up some heavy falls. A lot of humidity all through the east of the country and, of course, across the north as well. We've got an active monsoon trough and 4 tropical lows that I'm watching for development in the coming days. We've also got some high fire danger in the west, courtesy of heatwave conditions that are lingering in WA. We will see more storms for parts of southeastern New South Wales, then up along that trough into the southwest of Queensland, and then across the north as well. We're looking at the potential for some hefty totals, not just today, but right through the outlook. Those 4 systems, the one furthest west is likely to become a cyclone probably tonight, maybe tomorrow, but then that shifts off, as does the next one over. But the one up in the Gulf of Carpentaria and the one off Queensland are likely to bring a bit of a headache to large parts of northern and eastern Australia in the coming days. Hundreds of millimetres of rain potentially, even if they don't get to cyclone strength. These are going to be significant systems. Today, Queensland's already feeling the wet weather through the north, hefty falls for parts of Cape York Peninsula in particular, storms in the southwest, and also some showers along the east coast, including for Brisbane this morning, 30 your top. In New South Wales, the action's around what's left of that low in the southeast. Wet and stormy showers for Sydney, 29, 28, with some falls for Canberra. Wet weather's holding on for eastern Victoria as well. Melbourne's got a cloudy but fine 22, and Tassie's pretty settled, just a touch of a shower here and there. For Hobart, it's a fine 25. South Australia, clear until you look to the northeast. In the far corner, a couple of storms, 27 on the way for Adelaide. Southern WA is clear, it's getting to 37 in Perth. And up top, Gemma, we are talking wet and stormy weather. Showers for Darwin, top of 31.
Thanks, Nate. We have more on the ABC News app and on ABC iView. And coming up on the News Channel, we'll have more on the war in the Middle East. I'll be speaking with Iran expert Dr. Kylie Moore-Gilbert. Stay with us.